can I just take this moment to thank each and every one of you amazing supporters. This channel has grown into an amazing community of story lovers. I could not have done it without you guys. If you haven't yet subscribed, then please be part of this journey and help us reach new heights. I've always loved food and considered myself an amateur gourmand, so Bill's Tinder profile caught my eye right away. It read like a Michelin review, waxing poetic about his passion for preparing elaborate multi-course meals paired with rare wine vintages. His photos backed it up, all artistically composed glamour shots of lavish feasts he created in his gleaming kitchen. After some witty foodie banter over app messaging, I accepted Bill's invitation to his home for dinner that weekend. His culinary prowess seemed a can't-miss prospect for a stellar meal, if nothing else. I arrived at the specified time to an impressive Victorian brownstone and was whisked inside by a primly dressed Bill smelling deliciously of rosemary. He gave me a quick tour of the rich wood and marble kitchen, where several pots gently simmered. It felt wonderfully intimate glimpsing his creative process while sampling a velvety butternut squash bisque appetizer. Over the next 2 hours, Bill presented course after impeccable course for us to savor privately in his candlelit dining room. Pan-seared scallops in champagne sauce, delicate squash blossom tempura, succulent braised short ribs. Each dish rivaled anything I'd tasted in high-end restaurants. Bill talked modestly about his gourmet training as we lingered over exquisite chocolate souffles for dessert. I complimented the flawless meal, already comfortably tipsy from 3 kinds of artisan wine pairings. A fire crackled invitingly, so we retired to the parlor with yet more wine. Bill seated himself at a stately piano and began playing complex classical pieces while I relaxed zombie-like in luxurious contentment. How he achieved such virtuosity in cooking and musicianship I couldn't fathom. As time blurred intoxicatingly, the last coherent thought I clung to was incredulous gratitude at scoring an astonishing 10-tenths Tinder match. I gradually became aware something felt inherently off, though my sluggish senses couldn't pinpoint why. The room undulated weirdly as I tried focusing bleary eyes on Bill still engrossed in piano concerto across shadowy space. Nausea swelled suddenly, and I struggled pushing words out, interrupting the melodic flow to mumble apologies for feeling unexpectedly, violently ill. Bill's music halted as he regarded me silently before crossing the room in alarm to aid my attempted lurch for a bathroom. My rubbery legs betrayed me halfway there, and consciousness blinked out before I even registered hitting Persian rugs covering hardwood floors. Frigid air shocked my senses awake again through pulsing nausea. I cracked open gummy lids to see Bill looming over my supine body, grinning eagerly. We seemed to be in a small windowless basement room lined with rough shelves holding peculiar implements. Confusion mushroomed as I tried lifting laden arms to find myself restrained inexplicably to a damp concrete floor. Tendrils of terror pierced the sedative's choking grip, and I begged Bill in garbled pleading to help me, call the police, anything. But he just smiled serenely, supplying that the dinner's special ingredient would soon take full effect. In dawning horror, I realized this psychopath had poisoned me with God knows what, stalked me to his torture basement to act out disturbing compulsions. New hysteria flooded my veins, lending strength to yank violently at the restraints. Bill calmly checked his watch, humming as he selected items from the shelves before turning back to my prisoner form with predatory anticipation. Helpless screams tore my throat raw, and I thrashed like a rabid animal to avoid this monster's unthinkable designs. But the drugs paralyzed me into his personal plaything, and Bill set leisurely to work. He had no concept how much time lapsed during sessions of unspeakable agony and humiliation as my mind imploded in defense. But consciousness continued plaguing me relentlessly despite every desperate prayer for the mercy of death. Finally, Bill gazed down, pensively saying the peak effects had probably worn off by now. To my shredded bewilderment, he freed the restraints, wrapped my destroyed naked form in a monogrammed quilt, and carried me tenderly upstairs as if a sleeping child. The grandmotherly woman called Nana smiled affectionately from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. As she opened the front door, Bill handled my limp frame down the steps to a waiting car idling at the curb. The last sensations I recalled were laying numbly across the car's back seat, hyperventilating in disbelief, while Bill hummed blithely along with the radio up front. We drove steadily into the night toward a dark fate beyond dread or comprehension. Perhaps I fulfilled my purpose as a toy broken beyond value, discarded without warning once boredom set in. As we traveled deeper into remote blackness, my devastated mind withdrew into bleak timelessness, either awaiting whatever final horror lay ahead, or clinging to childlike magical hope that I might awake from enduring nightmare back home in my own safe bed. I never fathomed my mundane Tinder dating experiences could devolve into something so disturbingly sinister. After a string of bland but passable first dates, I matched with a guy named Brad who seemed relatively affable. Smart, employed, clever banter, basically promising compared to my usual swipe-based small talk. Those first few lightly flirtatious outings went smoothly enough over after-work drinks as we shared typical get-to-know-you conversations about jobs, pop culture, life in the city. But thinking back, undercurrents of unease stirred even then. An overly complimentary remark, fleeting unreadable look, pressing me for another date despite my non-committal smiles. Subtle oddities I tried shrugging off, determined to give these digital-era setups a fair chance before relegating Brad to my underwhelming dating misfires pile. But that nagging hesitation resurfaced more insistently in little ways. First during dinner, when Brad offhandedly mentioned my workplace company, a detail I definitely hadn't shared yet. Uneasy with him somehow discovering private information, I fielded panicked texts from friends insisting this breach signaled stalker red flags. Still, maybe just an awkward conversational fumble rather than true warning sign. I rationalized while sleeping with one eye open. I even reluctantly agreed to a third date, attempting to clarify relationship boundaries if we kept seeing each other. But Brad's responses morphed instantly cloying rather than simply over-eager, smothering me in too much too soon intensity no fledgling connection could healthily sustain. I finally drew the line after he showed up uninvited at a girl's night happy hour, instantly crashing the lighthearted mood. Making anxious excuses, I went home early to reassess why I kept giving this presumptuous guy infinite chances when my gut screamed walk away. Was either out of touch interpreting dates, or just desperate to justify online matchmaking odds? Either way, I finally messaged Brad firmly, but politely later, that I just didn't see long-term potential, so we should probably stop seeing each other romantically. Rather than accept my gentle letdown, Brad unleashed a barrage of unhinged emotional terrorism, unlike anything I ever imagined from simple online dating. His onslaught began with pleading voicemail rants to demand I justify exactly why I rejected him after he invested so much effort wooing me. When I refused to provide fodder feeding his entitlement, he alternated beg and berate tactics, insisting no sane woman would dump an amazing guy like him without giving a real man ample chances to prove himself. His twisted logic concluded I owed him yet more dates to make my final judgment with clarity after bonding so profoundly. As I stuck to my insistence on cutting ties, Brad's initially desperate rages morphed into sinister manipulation efforts to punish my defiance. He hijacked my social media accounts to post provocative statuses and photos inviting vulgar harassment by strangers. He signed my email up for offensive mailing lists, ensuring endless filthy spam I couldn't halt without new accounts. Most creepily, he had obscure personal gifts delivered to shock and unsettle me. A bouquet of 24 red roses arrived at my office lobby, with every stem brutally snapped in half, thorns pointed outward. No card beyond the scribble of the infinity symbol. Even more disturbing, an unmarked package appeared at my home containing various bizarre objects clearly referencing distinct private conversations from our past dates. The nonsensical assortment became increasingly vulgar and threatening over subsequent mystery deliveries. Though no return labels or notes ever revealed the sender's identity, the chilling message screamed loud and clear that Brad enjoyed proving he could still violate my space whenever he chose. I finally worked up the courage to contact local police about the mounting harassment and stalking. But because no outright criminal threats or actions occurred beyond general creepiness, they emphasized limitations in becoming involved at that time. They left the full burden on me to somehow halt or evade the shocking abuse entirely independently, though Brad seemed perpetually at least one unseen step ahead in plotting his next trauma campaign. Soon afterwards, photocopied flyers appeared taped all over my neighborhood with my full name circled threateningly in red marker. The ambiguously menacing notes seemed intentionally crafted to brute force invading my psyche, attacking from the shadows just like Brad himself. Each new encroachment effectively dismantled protective boundaries I desperately tried erecting against his sabotage of any sense of security or autonomy. I oscillated between rage at Brad's demonic obsession with me and despair at police apathy leaving me utterly alone to combat this personalized terrorism. Every attempt to rebuild my life only triggered exponentially more flagrant efforts to shatter normalcy. Brad made unambiguously clear he would never cease haunting me in some capacity for daring to reject his deviant interest. Soon that despair morphed over to hypervigilance. As I realized his shadow haunted everywhere I dared show my face. Coffee shop staff mentioned a man lurking to ask probing questions about my habits right at closing time. Favorite boutiques received strange calls seeking intel on my clothing tastes. Even cautious neighbors whispered about a guy endlessly circling our apartment parking lot peering at unit numbers. None could fully ID him beyond some tall, pale dude with dark hair asking intrusive specifics that betrayed intimate knowledge. Certainly, no one from my actual social circles. The gaslighting shell game continued with unfamiliar vehicles appearing randomly wherever I drove, only to vanish by the time I circled back for evidence. Exit a building and glimpse a dark figure ducking behind a corner seconds too late. Wake up to foreign objects placed ominously on my own doorstep overnight. Hundreds of provocations blending life and nightmare, until I could scarcely function for fear of the next trauma manifestation. Somewhere in that feverish descent towards emotional breakdown, perspective shifted. Understanding crystallized that Brad's demonic fixation would only cease by forcibly removing his infection from my ravaged psyche at any cost. Perhaps somewhere in his sociopathic manipulation, he even believed possessing my soul equaled a relationship, rather than outright mental terror. Regardless, reclaiming sanity and safety now relied upon resolutely confronting the very monster I unwittingly invited past barriers never breached before, even acknowledging the likely finality beyond that inevitable reckoning. And so resigned yet determined, I now set events in motion offstage from his crazed puppeteer choreography. I've met plenty of duds through Tinder of awkward conversations fizzling out, uncomfortable first dates with utterly no chemistry. But nothing prepared me for the true hidden menace lurking behind one seemingly innocuous online match. It began so harmlessly. Jason's opening message stood out, showing genuine thought rather than just flinging out pickup lines. We discovered surprisingly similar offbeat tastes in old horror movies, psychedelic rock, fantasy art. After 2 weeks of lighthearted digital flirting about obscure interests, I felt comfortable suggesting we meet up in person. He readily agreed while thoughtfully suggesting dinner at Killarney's, a favorite casual brewpub in my own neighborhood for extra safety. Between witty banter and practical planning, Jason came across as a self-aware gentleman I could risk a low-key first date with anticipation rather than requisite first-meet dread. So when Saturday evening rolled around, I sauntered over to the lively pub, truly upbeat about enjoying decent company if nothing else. I scanned the bustling place for Jason's face from his photos, but the crowds made connecting tricky. I messaged him jokingly asking how to spot him, describing my bright teal sweater for reference. Quickly, his reply chimed back oddly saying, "Look for the Grizzly Adams beard." I did double take. Beard? None of his profile pictures showed facial hair. In fact, he'd sent a cute selfie just yesterday morning, clearly clean-shaven. Before I could process this inconsistency, a bulky figure separated itself from a rowdy group by the pool tables and started lumbering straight toward me. I blinked uncertainly as an enormous man, easily 6.5 feet and 300 pounds beneath a strained graphic tee, closed and grinning eagerly. A ragged brown beard covered half his ruddy face. "Gianna, why do you look even hotter in person, babe?" I shrank back instinctively as this hulking impostor engulfed my hands in his meaty paws for sympathetic effect. Every self-preservation alarm blared, taking in beer sloshing down his shirt and the stale woo scent wafting off him. I stammered uncertainly that he looked different than his photo suggested. The ogre guffawed, saying no camera could capture his magnificence properly, but I'd adjust soon enough. Those giant clammy hands planted themselves proprietarily around my waist, steering me toward an empty booth already littered with his pitcher of beer. Clearly, Lumberjack Guy expected me to accept this ambush as our fun new dating reality. What followed qualifies as one of the most excruciating hours of my life. Whenever personality magic Jason and I shared online died a swift death in this scenario. My horror crystallized into trapped audience status as this beer-bloated stranger dominated all conversation. He rambled continuously about himself, his boring warehouse job, obsessive gym workout routines, awful 90s hard rock bands he insisted on blaring from his phone speaker. Any attempts I made to redirect the boorish monologue earned me barking lectures why my female opinions were too emotional and misinformed on every possible topic. When the waiter appeared, Lumberjack ordered us both greasy burgers and fries without asking, then proceeded to noisily shovel his pile down with glutinous abandon as I sat and picked queasily a puddle of melted ice cream, too tense to eat. Any time I hesitantly tried politely ending things early, this psycho's mood pivoted on a dime. Thunderous anger flashed that I would reject him so callously after all his gentlemanly courtesy. Yet just as quickly his dark frustration dissipated back into cheery oblivion that I was enjoying our special connection. The server dropping the check became my flight signal. I lied urgently about a fictional early work call needing response, pulling cash hastily from my wallet. My hulking imposter looked wounded but acquiesced amiably to walk me out in a show of courtly behavior that might have fooled bystanders. Outside in the relative safety of public space, I exhaled relief, ready to escape his disastrous ruse. But without warning, Lumberjack grabbed roughly for a sloppy, open-mouthed first kiss accompanied by big groping paws sliding over my body. Recoiling violently, I screamed at him to get the hell away from me right now. He blinked down, apparently confused by my failure to swoon at this romantic gesture after an intimate dinner, clearly spelling future relations. Then despair shifted scarily again into something harder and sociopathic. Eyes narrowing, he advanced closer, droning about how I was just another cock-teased bitch deliberately seducing men when you hold all the power. Backstepping frantically, I babbled promises to pay for counseling, called him an Uber, anything to halt this hulking powder keg visibly destabilizing. Suddenly, the pub's side door swung open, casting harsh security lights over us as another group exited mid-conversation. In that split-second distraction, I spun and sprinted back inside, chest heaving with adrenaline. Peering wide-eyed through the frosted glass door, I watched the ominous shadow hesitate, stomp away angrily, then turn to roar vague threats at me before disappearing down darkened streets. I lingered uneasily long after reasonable, shepherded gently by sympathetic servers, and a kindly old regular at the bar who said he'd waited with me gladly until my Uber arrived as a safety precaution. That night, as I triple-bolted my front door, Cold reality sank in that tech anonymity grants free rein for deception about lives and appearances. But worse, it can strategically conceal disturbed psyches and abhorrent intentions. I scrubbed all dating app accounts next morning, preferring solo security over ever again playing existential Russian roulette with an unknowable void masquerading as a suitor. Let Jason and his false online identity rot undiscovered, while a very real monster undoubtedly still skulks the streets, hunting his next unwitting prey. For me, that particular demon left permanent impact, restoring the cautionary instinct that true evil often disguises itself, wearing normalcy's banal facade, until it turns destructive upon shattering helpless victims.